Hi, I'm Susie Miller, the Better Relationship Coach. And on today's episode of Better Relationship TV, we're going to be talking about conflict and why it's so important in marriage. It's something that I talked about on my really quick If You Need a Marriage Coach video this week. And then I had an interview with a good friend who is a marriage and family therapist out in Seattle, Zach Brittle, and he's actually going to be my guest on my podcast this week. He's releasing his very first book, The Relationship Alphabet, and it will be available on Friday on Amazon. And as we were doing the interview, we talked about the fact that conflict is such an important part of a healthy, strong, growing marriage or any committed relationship. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit today because a lot of times we're afraid of conflict. We're really, we don't like tension. We don't like those tough conversations. We really, people don't go, oh, I love conflict. So oftentimes what we do is we sweep it under the rug, we pretend it doesn't matter, we do that thing that girls do where we go, I'm fine, and in that high voice where our spouses know for sure we're not fine and they probably should ask about it. But anyway, one of the things that I've realized is that couples don't do conflict well because they're afraid it's going to do more damage. And what I want to do is tell you that not having conflict, not learning to struggle together well, to disagree well, really can take its toll on your marriage. In fact, the Gottman Institute, where my friend Zach works, has done years of studies, longitudinal studies, where they followed couples for 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 10, 15, 20, 25 years into marriage, and watched them and studied them, and they came up with some really big predictors of healthy and strong lasting relationships. And one of those is the ability to have conflict well. And so what exactly do I mean by that? Having conflict well, the important word is well, and healthy conflict is when you disagree without any violence. Sure, you might raise your voice, you might fight, but there is this idea of being able to be emotional and maybe angry and disappointed and share your feelings and have it not threaten the relationship. Now, for a moment or two or hour or two, or for a little bit, it might really be a hard thing, and you might have to look at your spouse and go, I can't talk about this anymore, and get some space. And that's fine. That's not a problem in conflict. In fact, I would say that's a part of healthy conflict, to be able to say, what, I need some space. I need to think about this. One of the funny stories I tell is early on in our marriage, John and I did not do conflict well. In fact, I grew up in a family where if you were talking about it or you were even arguing about it and it was angry, at least you were connected. And silence was much harder for us to deal with. Whereas in his family, it was really, people didn't yell, and if you yelled, you were in trouble or you were mad. And so here we had this totally different way of looking at conflict where he just wanted it to end and for it to go away. And I wanted to finish the conversation no matter what. So you can only imagine how that created issues and problems and certainly drama in our home. And I'll never forget this one time. We were having a conversation. He was done. And he walked into the dining room, and I literally followed him into the other room, kind of like, aren't you going to finish this conversation? Aren't we going to talk about this? And not realizing that that was really making it worse. I was young, I know. But over time, I was able to learn when he needed a break, or if he said I need a break, I could honor that. Or I could also say, what? For us to stop talking about anything right now would really be hard for me. Can we at least press the pause button and maybe watch a movie together or do something else, because there was such a fear of being disconnected for me. Withdrawal for me meant the relationship was in trouble versus he just needed a break. So part of good conflict is really learning each other, learning how the other person handles stress, handles conflict, handles those moments of that uncomfortable feeling. And sometimes you have to sit in it. Sometimes you have to press the pause button. Sometimes you have to, push through it and really get to the real issue at hand. The biggest tip I can give you is that you do talk about it, that you talk about that it's hard to talk about, that you name what's happening. That's a huge hint for having good conflict. Clearly, this is more than a one-shot conversation, and I'm sure we'll revisit it on other episodes of Better Relationship TV. But be sure to check out the Better Relationship podcast this Friday, July 31st, to hear Zach and I talk about what makes a strong marriage, how to create a strong marriage. And of course, we include this topic of learning how to have healthy conflict. So if you've had a great way of handling conflict in your marriage, or if after you listen to the podcast you have a great idea, please feel free to comment below or even in the podcast notes, because we all want to learn from each other. So that's our episode for today, and I'll see you next week.